If death is truly home, then why do some people come back? Music stops. Wind brushes past the lens. A bell chimes long and low. A loop begins. I died, quite literally. My body lay beneath twisted metal. My blood soaked into the snow. My wife and my son, the two I loved more than life itself, had gone before me. And then I saw the light. I thought I had come home. But strangely, I was sent back, because someone still needed me. Not the doctors, not my family, not even God, but me, the self I had forgotten. My name is Lucas Walker, and I came back from the dead, not to tell a strange story, but to remind you of something simple. You may still be alive, but your soul may have been asleep for a very long time. Have you ever lived but felt like you were slowly dying day by day? I wasn't a bad man. I never hit my wife, never yelled at my son. I went to work, came home on time, paid the insurance, walked the dog, shoveled snow off the roof. Sometimes I even fixed my son's toys. I was the kind of man people looked at and said, "Good father, decent husband." But inside, I was empty. I loved Julia, I loved Caleb, but the way I loved wasn't what they hoped for. I loved without touch, loved without words, loved like I was holding a piece of fine porcelain, too afraid to touch it for fear it might break. Because I, myself, it was already broken. I used to believe in the light, in poetry, in painting, in sacred things. Until the day my younger brother left this world without a single word. From that moment on, I went silent. I didn't cry. I didn't tell anyone. I simply built a prison of iron to lock away my feelings, and with them, my heart. Julia, my wife, was the only one who ever got close to the door. But over time, she grew tired of knocking on a door that never opened. I remember one evening in March, we were playing a game as a family. Share something you're grateful for. Julia said, "I'm grateful that you're still here." Caleb said, "I'm grateful Dad fixed my Lego spaceship." When it was my turn, I said just one thing. "I'm thankful for this roof over our heads." That was it. After dinner that night, Caleb tugged at my sleeve. "Dad, do you believe in angels?" I stayed silent. I didn't know what to say. He looked at me, his dark eyes sadder than the night sky. "I saw one, in a dream. The angel had curly blonde hair like Mom. You don't believe me, I know." I walked away, and I just stood there, like a cold, unmoving statue. I used to think that staying silent was the way to avoid hurting the people I loved. But the truth is, I hurt them with my silence. I never raised a hand against them, but I also never truly held my child close. Never looked my wife in the eyes and said, "I need you." Never cried for anyone, since I was 20 years old. Julia once said to me, her voice trembling after yet another unfinished conversation, "I don't know how much longer I can stay. It feels like I'm living next to a soul that hasn't passed on." I replied, "You're overthinking it." That sentence, it is one of the things I regret most in my life. Caleb ran out and handed me a drawing, an angel flying through the snow, holding a silent man in its arms. I gave a soft smile and said, "It's beautiful, buddy." That morning, Julia said to me, "We should visit my parents. It's been over 6 months. They miss Caleb." I simply nodded, expressionless. The truth was, I didn't like trips like that. The overly polite small talk, the questions no one cared to hear the answers to. Caleb, on the other hand, was thrilled. He dragged his suitcase, hopping around the house, singing some song about winter and candy. I sat on the porch, sipping my coffee, watching the snow fall in waves of white. "Are you coming, Dad?" Caleb asked, his eyes lighting up. "Yes," I replied, half-heartedly. I used to think I was a strong man, until I stood powerless, watching my entire world fall apart and disappear into the deepest darkness, a place that felt like the end. But it was there, That I truly began to live. I don't remember the exact moment the car lost control. I just remember Julia's soft laugh as Caleb played with his bread, the gentle look in her eyes through the rearview mirror, and then snow. Snow had been falling non-stop all morning. I hesitated before we left the house, but Julia said, "My parents have been waiting so long. It's just a few hours, honey." I didn't want to go, not because of the snow, but because of me. I was never good at playing the role of the gentle husband or the attentive father, especially in front of her family. I always felt like I didn't deserve them. But Julia was always patient, always loving. She never blamed me, until everything disappeared. I heard the screeching of tires. Julia's scream was short, like a warning that didn't have time to form. A truck, out of control, came hurtling toward us from the opposite lane, its headlights bare lighting. Caleb let out a cry. Julia reached out instinctively to shield him. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I had no idea where I was. There was a faint buzzing sound, like static electricity flickering, and the space around me felt weightless. I couldn't see my body. I couldn't hear my heartbeat. I couldn't feel my hands or feet, but I knew I still existed. "Am I dead?" I asked, but no sound came out. Only silence. Not a cold silence, but a warm one. As if I had just been embraced by an ocean of forgiveness. I floated, gently, without fear. There was a light in the distance, not blinding, but full of compassion. I couldn't take my eyes off it. It didn't call to me, but I knew I had to move closer. As I approached, I saw an endless field, a place where the light seemed to breathe. The grass was a glowing green, as if woven from memories. The flowers had no names yet in them. I saw Julia making tea in the morning, Caleb's laughter when I carried him on my shoulders. Where was I? And then I heard the voice, not through my ears, but echoing through every cell of my soul. "Welcome home." I turned. In front of me was a being, not a shape, but pure light. And that light knew me. It didn't ask my name, because it was the place where all names dissolved. I fell to my knees, not out of fear, but because for the first time in my life, I felt fully seen, even the broken parts, the selfish parts, the wounded parts. And still I was loved. I didn't ask to return, but it or he allowed me to see. Not like watching a film, but reliving every moment I had ever lived, only this time through the eyes of others. I felt Julia's heart every time I walked away in silence, felt the gentle but persistent ache as she tried to pull me out of the darkness I was trapped in. I saw Caleb see the sparkle in his eyes as he waited for me to pick him up, and saw how many times I looked away. "I didn't know I had hurt them that much," I whispered. The voice spoke again, this time like a hand gently resting on my shoulder. "You don't need to know. You need to feel and forgive." I broke down in tears. I thought I had no tears left, but the soul has its way of weeping. And then from within the light, they stepped forward. Julia was still Julia. Her eyes held no sorrow, no blame, only comfort. Caleb came running, younger, like he was 3 years old. He threw his arms around me. I knelt, trembling. I whispered, "I'm sorry, Caleb." But the boy simply said, "Dad, I've always been here." Julia nodded. "We don't disappear, we return. And you will too, just not yet." You're not angry with me? You don't need to be forgiven. You just need to love again. I was brought to an endless hallway, lined with countless doors. Each door led to a different version of me. If I had chosen to forgive, if I had chosen to love sooner, if I had chosen to leave the silence inside me behind, One door shone brighter than the rest. The being said, "If you wish, you may stay, but if you choose to return to life as if every breath is a thank you." I looked at Julia and Caleb. I didn't want to leave them again, not ever. But then Caleb whispered, "Dad, you still have something to do." Julia took my hand and placed it over her heart. A beam of light passed through me, and I fell. I jolted awake to the sound of the ventilator. My body was burning, broken, in excruciating pain, but I was alive. A nurse screamed. Doctors rushed in. Someone shouted, "We've got a pulse." But inside me, there was only one sentence echoing, "No mistake is greater than love." I died, but not to leave, to return. They call me a survivor, but I'm no longer the man I used to be. I'm a soul that learned how to love from the place where I once died. They said I had been in a coma for over 7 days. The doctors said there was no chance. But then, I woke up. I didn't scream. I didn't ask where my wife and son were. I just lay still and cried. Not from grief, but because I had come back, and for the first time in my life, I knew I had been given another chance. The first days, my body could barely move. My lower half was wrapped in bandages. My left arm was in a cast. Every breath sent sharp pain through my chest. But no physical pain. Was it ever as terrifying as the emptiness inside me? Each night, I heard Caleb's laughter in my dreams. Each morning, I reached for Julia beside me. No one was there. Only the IV machine, beeping, beep, beep. I started keeping a journal, even though I had to relearn how to write with my right hand. Not to remember, but to survive. My dear Julia, you once said I was better at being silent than saying, "I love you." Now, there's no one left to love but this pain. But I won't let it destroy me, because you and Caleb chose to forgive me. I will live as a way to repay that grace. After 1 month, I began physical therapy. That first step felt like stepping on a blade, but I took it anyway. Not to get somewhere, but to move toward a new version of myself, the man Julia once saw buried deep inside me. I signed up for a gardening class at the hospital, a place where patients tended plants like they were tending to hope. I named my first potted plant Hope. Every morning, I sat quietly with it, whispering, as if speaking to Caleb. "I miss you, son, but don't worry, Dad's going to keep his promise." I began to open up. The therapist asked me, "Do you want to talk about the accident?" I nodded. But I didn't talk about the death. I talked about the light, about the voice with no form, yet filled with love. About what it felt like to see myself through someone else's eyes. The doctor cried. After that, the hospital invited me to speak to a group of late-stage cancer patients. I only meant to say a few words, but once I stood up, I couldn't stop. I spoke about Julia, about Caleb, about the hallway where I had to choose between the light and responsibility. I spoke about how there's no time left to love if today were your last day. A woman stood up, leaning on her cane. "My daughter died in an accident 5 years ago. I thought I'd never forgive myself. But when you said guilt is not divine, I finally understood. I don't have to keep punishing myself to keep her memory alive." I wrote a small book titled, "If You Were a Puddle of Blood, I'd Still Love You." Words Caleb had said to me in the light. I didn't expect anyone to read it. But 6 months later, I received a letter from an 83-year-old woman in Texas. I read every word of your book as if I were reading my own heart. I lost my husband in 1964, and I've never forgiven myself for not reaching the hospital in time. Now I have only one wish left: to die in forgiveness. Thank you for giving me that gift. I folded the letter, and for the first time in a very long time, I truly smiled. A year after the accident, I moved to a small town near the mountains. No TV, no social media, just me and a humble wooden cabin where I plant seeds, write handwritten letters to those who feel lost, and serve as a spiritual guide for a support group of people grieving loved ones. I teach them how to revisit their memories. Through light, have you ever heard a voice from a place no one else could reach? I have, and I've carried it in every breath I take since the day I lost my child. I will live as a way to repay that grace. After 1 month, I began physical therapy. That first step felt like stepping on a blade, but I took it anyway. Not to get somewhere, but to move toward a new version of myself, the man Julia once saw buried deep inside me. I signed up for a gardening class at the hospital, a place where patients tended plants like they were tending to hope. I named my first potted plant Hope. Every morning, I sat quietly with it, whispering as if speaking to Caleb. I miss you, son, but don't worry, Dad's going to keep his promise. I began to open up. The therapist asked me, "Do you want to talk about the accident?" I nodded, but I didn't talk about the death. I talked about the light, about the voice with no form, yet filled with love, about what it felt like to see myself through someone else's eyes. The doctor cried. After that, the hospital invited me to speak to a group of late-stage cancer patients. I only meant to say a few words, but once I stood up, I couldn't stop. I spoke about Julia, about Caleb, about the hallway where I had to choose between the light and responsibility. I spoke about how there's no time left to love if today were your last day. A woman stood up, leaning on her cane. My daughter died in an accident 5 years ago. I thought I'd never forgive myself. But when you said guilt is not divine, I finally understood I don't have to keep punishing myself to keep her memory alive. I wrote a small book titled, "If You Were a Puddle of Blood, I'd Still Love You." Words Caleb had said to me in the light. I didn't expect anyone to read it. But 6 months later, I received a letter from an 83-year-old woman in Texas. I read every word of your book as if I were reading my own heart. I lost my husband in 1964, and I've never forgiven myself for not reaching the hospital in time. Now I have only one wish left: to die in forgiveness. Thank you for giving me that gift. I folded the letter, and for the first time in a very long time, I truly smiled. A year after the accident, I moved to a small town near the mountains. No TV, no social media, just me and a humble wooden cabin where I plant seeds, write handwritten letters to those who feel lost, and serve as a spiritual guide for a support group of people grieving loved ones. I teach them how to revisit their memories. Through light, have you ever heard a voice from a place no one else could reach? I have, and I've carried it in every breath I take since the day I lost my child. I still remember it, as if it happened just yesterday. The day Caleb left, snow covered the windshield in white. We were on our way to visit Julia's parents. Julia, my wife, turned to smile as she adjusted Caleb's scarf. I was at the wheel, never knowing it would be our final drive. When everything turned white, when the scream of metal tore through the silence, everything went still. And from that moment on, I survived, but the two most important people in my life did not. But the strange thing was, in the days when I could barely stand, I began to hear Caleb's voice, not with my ears, but with my heart. It was soft, like the wind, but clear, as if he were sitting right next to me. "Dad, I'm still here. Do you believe me?" I thought I was losing my mind, but the voice kept returning again and again, like a song that refused to fade. He said to me, "Dad, stop blaming yourself. I was never angry at you, not even for a second." I couldn't hold back my tears, because for all these years I had lived with a haunting weight. If I had taken a different road, if I had stopped for gas, if I had let Julia drive. But my son, a 7-year-old boy, spoke a language of compassion that most adults may never learn in a lifetime. "You did the best you could, and that is enough. He told me about the place beyond the light, a place with no walls, no ceilings, only light, soft as a mother's embrace. He said Julia was there too, still singing him to sleep, not with words, but with melodies as gentle as the breath of heaven. He met souls without form. They didn't need words. A single touch was enough. In that place, every emotion was felt through light. I listened, unable to imagine it. But what haunted me most was this. I see you every night, Dad. Every time you curl up in the dark, I sit at the edge of your bed. I place my hand on your shoulder, even if you can't feel it. But I see you so clearly. I choked up. I remembered those sleepless nights, clutching the little shirt that still held the scent of my son. And when he told me he had heard me crying, it felt like my heart was being torn apart. Then he continued, as if he didn't want me to sink too far into sorrow. You know, Dad, over there, no mistake is ever permanent. There's no judgment, only love and light. He emphasized one thing. There's nothing to forgive because no one is truly guilty. Everything is part of a sacred order. We just can't understand while we're still on earth. But in the end, my heart was the only place that could truly confirm it. My son was telling the truth. Caleb said he was allowed to send a few dreams back. Once, I dreamed of a golden field stretching endlessly. Julia stood far in the distance, and Caleb came running toward me. He hugged me tight and said, "Dad, if you were a puddle of blood, I'd still love you." I woke up soaked in tears. But from that moment on, something in me began to change. I started looking at the sunlight a little longer. I listened to the birds as if hearing them for the very first time. And I began to write my son's story so that others too might find healing, just as I did. He also told me, every time you help someone in pain, a light over here grows brighter. Every time you forgive yourself, I get to be a little closer to Mom. And every time you say my name, even in silence, I hear it. I'm still living, but I'm no longer the man I used to be. I'm no longer the man who clenched his fists because he thought he had to be strong. I'm no longer the father tormented by the past. I'm someone learning how to love again because of my son. Caleb once said one final thing before the dreams began to fade. When the time comes someday, far from now, you'll come back here, and I'll run to the gate of light shouting, "Dad, I'm here." Then I'll hug you tight and say, "I've always been proud to be your son. I'm no longer afraid of death, because I know beyond that door, my son is waiting. With light, with love, and with a promise that will never fade. Dad, don't live in the grave of your sorrow, because I'm blooming on the other side." One late autumn afternoon, I received a letter from another father. I lost my son because I was the one driving drunk that night. I was ready to end my life. But then I heard you say that the light doesn't judge. I cried for 3 straight hours. And for the first time in 4 years, I found the courage to write my son's name in a letter. I placed my hand over my heart. Caleb is still here. I don't live to go back to who I was. I live to become the light that my wife and son once saw in me, even when I had lost sight of it myself. Every morning, I light a candle in front of 2 small photos of Julia and Caleb. I don't pray. I simply say, I'm living one more day to love for your part and his. Rebirth isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been and choosing to live as that person every day with your whole heart. The most painful thing isn't losing someone you love. It's realizing you could have loved them more. I used to think that rebirth was a magical moment, like in the movies, when the light bursts through and all the wounds suddenly heal. But the truth is, rebirth is a daily battle. It's choosing love over resentment. It's choosing to live instead of merely existing. 3 years after the accident, I still haven't had a full night's sleep. But I no longer run from it. Every time the old dreams return, I write them down, not as a victim, but as someone chosen to tell the story of the light. I attend near-death experience conferences across the U.S. I'm not a famous speaker, but I am a living witness. They invite me because I dare to tell the truth. About mistakes that can't be undone. About the cost of silence. About the power of forgiveness. A middle-aged man once shook my hand after a talk in Seattle. His eyes were red with tears. I haven't cried since I was 19. Today, I cried because you dared to hurt me all the way through. And I realized I need to learn how to do that too. I live near a nature preserve. Every morning, I walk the trail through the woods where the fallen leaves feel like a carpet of time. One autumn morning, I saw a little girl sitting alone on a stone bench, her head bowed. I quietly sat down beside her, saying nothing. After a while, she spoke. "Do you believe my mom is still here?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper, a quote from Caleb that I always carry with me. "If you were a puddle of blood, I'd still love you." I handed it to the little girl. Her eyes widened. After a moment, she nodded. She didn't say anything else. But as she stood up to leave, she whispered, "That's what my mom would say too, if she saw me sad. Thank you." I often receive handwritten letters and emails from all over. A 62-year-old man once wrote, "I lost my wife in a motorcycle accident. We fought before she left the house. I never got to say I'm sorry. Reading your story felt like talking to a version of myself from the past. Now I'm learning to write to her every day, even if it's just in my journal." Thank you for surviving, for people like me who didn't. A college student from the Philippines once emailed me. "I once planned to end my life after my mom passed away. But when I listened to your podcast, I felt like my mom was still watching me. Learning how to live. I'm no longer afraid of the future." The last person I ever expected to show up did. My father, the man who walked out on our family when I was 8. I once swore I would never forgive him. But there he was, sitting in the very last row of a workshop, head bowed. I didn't notice him until I was nearly finished speaking. In that moment, I stopped and looked straight at the back row. Sometimes, the person who hurt us the most, it is the one who teaches us the final lesson about unconditional love. After that event, we met at a small cafe near my home. We didn't talk about the past. We just asked each other, "Did you see the light?" "Yes, and I wish I had walked toward it much sooner." I nodded. There was nothing more to say. It was simply enough. I used to think happiness was about returning when everything goes back to how it used to be. Now I understand. Happiness is being able to move forward, carrying wounds that have been healed. I'm no longer afraid of loneliness, because I know I've never truly been alone. Julia is still here, in the way I arrange flowers, in the soup I cook, the one she used to love. Caleb is still here, in the sound of children laughing outside the schoolyard. And the presence, it's always there, whenever I long to return to the light, even for just a moment. I'm 65 years old. I was invited to speak at a large auditorium in Boston. As I walked onto the stage, I knew this might be my last time. I looked out at thousands of faces, waiting to hear something profound. But I simply said, "You don't have to die to realize you've made mistakes. You just have to be brave enough to live to redeem every moment you once missed. Love with your whole heart today. Because if tomorrow never comes, at least you will have loved the right way." And I stepped off the stage. No music, no lights. Only the sound of applause echoed for a very long time. If you're reading these final lines, I want you to know, you are not broken. You are not too late. You are not being punished. You're simply being called back to yourself. Don't rush to move on. Sit still. Listen to your heart and begin with one simple question. If today were my last day, how would I love? Then live by that answer. Share your story in the comments below. If you've ever had a near-death experience, lost someone you loved, or walked through a dark season. Your story could be the light someone else is waiting for. Follow this channel to continue the healing journey, one step at a time, with honesty and love.